It's barbecue chicken time. This build will not only increase your damage against enemies that are on fire, but every time you set them on fire, you'll create a little explosion of fire damage. It's hot, it's toasty, and it's a lot of fun. Let's go. Let me know what other builds you'd like to see in the comments down below. This build really came together for a couple of reasons. One, it's how fun the fire pipe is to use, but also there's a lot of skills specifically revolved around status effects and increasing your damage with status effects. So you can do an insane amount of damage when you get the right set bonuses and skills. And plus there's a thing called the Affliction Wave, which is a skill that anytime you actually afflict a status effect, you'll do like that little puff of explosion that'll then apply it to other enemies as well. And then if you combine this with the Master Strategist set bonus, you can not only increase the size of that and the amount of enemies it hits of that Affliction Wave, but you can also increase the amount of damage you do to enemies that have a status effect applied. So we're comboing all of this together to increase the overall damage we do against enemies with status effects, to apply a lot of status effects, and just use the fire pipe because it's fun to use a flamethrower in like medieval Japan, right? So it doesn't have to be the fire status either, as some enemies may be resistant to it, and in that case you can switch to like poison, which you'll see in some of this footage as well. And you know, it does work perfectly using the bow for this build as well, because it has both fire arrows and poison arrows, so you can trigger those status effects from distance. Up close and personal, you've obviously got the fire pipe, but you've also got the fire and poison whetstones, which you can apply to your weapon. So anytime you actually swing your weapon, you'll start triggering and applying that status effect build up as well. And once you've upgraded the fire pipe, you'll have different firing modes, like a wider sort of AoE to hit multiple enemies, and then a more focused like high voltage attack for sort of focusing on single target bosses. So there's a lot of flexibility here, but the whole thing revolves around those status effects. And this build's really good and helpful if you do struggle with some of the parry timing windows, as you can sort of briefly stagger enemies whenever a status effect goes off, so you don't have to worry too much about those, and just that extra damage you can get off from having the status effects applied definitely helps whittle down some of those tougher enemies. Now, for skills here, I won't go too deep into every skill because we'll be here all day, but just for the main ones we'll cover, and you can sort of pause the video if you want to go through the rest. But essentially, you want to grab all the skills in the strength line, because it's not only relevant for the strength stat to increase your attack and your defense, but there's a lot of skills in here that increase your overall damage, your combo damage, your martial skill damage, your max health, all that really great stuff. Any build needs strength. And in the dexterity line, you can grab the assassinate skills here. They're not bad to grab, as well as some of the bow skills, which are important as well, all the grappling hook skills. And the charm line doesn't have too much that's relevant to us, so we can sort of just skip over straight into intellect, which is where you'll get most of the bang for your buck. And it comes from this line here on the right hand side for the Affliction Wave, which we've talked about, as well as attack up on afflicted enemies and the duration up on adding affinities, which is really important, as this will significantly extend the duration of your whetstones, which is a pretty big deal, as the initial timer without any buffs is pretty short. It doesn't last very long. So by getting this, and then by getting the set bonus as well, the status effect on your whetstones and like the duration of it will last significantly longer, which you'll definitely need for some of those harder encounters. The longer you can have that applied, the easier it is to then apply those status effects on enemies as well. For your equipment, gear wise, you don't really need to worry too much. The one set you absolutely need is Master Strategist, which we've already touched on. This gives you that extra Affliction Wave, the attack up on afflicted enemies, the duration of your affinities, and the extra intellect. Your second set's a little personal preference, right? I'm using the Matchless Master here because I've just always had, for some reason, seemed my RNG loot drops has had really good Matchless Master drops, so I'm just using that set there, and it is a good set. Though you can sort of run anything here, like Clear-Headed Samurai and the Marvelous Sword Sate are both really good offensive sets. Or if you want some more defense, you could run the Mighty Warrior, which will increase your defensive, like lowering your damage taken, as well as increase the damage you do for the lower amount of health you have. Really, until you get to sort of like the end-ish of the game, you'll only have one set bonus applied. So you really just want to focus on getting those Master Strategist pieces, which, because of the RNG of the whole thing, there isn't really any specific way you can get them. You've really just got to, you know, hopefully get lucky with the loot drops. There are specific vendors, though, that do drop specific set bonuses. So if you do find one, just make a note of that. And you can actually get some of the Master Strategist pieces from the silver coin vendors, like the cat collecting vendor and the fugitive definitive official vendor as well. But one thing to note here with any gear in general, right, is that your equipment level is very important. I'll have a video coming out that covers this in much detail, which I'll link here once it is out. But a thing to note is that if you find a vendor that has the sets that you want, you can return to them at a later stage once your player level is higher, which in turn increases your equipment level, and then buy those items from them because it will be of that higher equipment level, so it'll have much better stats. Also, if you like what we do here, consider hitting that like button or subscribing, or the membership program. For just $1, you can get early access to videos like this and all of my other guides, build videos, and those cheeky long form essays we do. Plus, there are other benefits like members only channels in the Discord, merch, and more. So if you like what we do here, please consider hitting that join button or subscribing, as it helps me more than you know. But enough of that, back to the video. And also, if you're wondering how to get the additional accessory slots, you need to complete the technology development, which you should be doing anyway by finding the foreign books and then purchasing the upgrades, because a lot of the fire pipe upgrades are all from that tech dev tree, like the diffused spray to give you that wider firing mode. So you get the foreign books either by finding them in chests or by doing side quests. Just look at the rewards for any quests that come up and it'll show you if it does have a foreign book that it'll give you, and then go and do that quest and you'll be able to get it and then purchase the reward after the fact. And like in terms of if you're wondering what weapons to use, like realistically you can use any weapon that suits your playstyle, right? You can use a slower weapon if you like, though for this build having a faster attacking weapon is definitely better, like a katana or an oxtail blade, because you want to be triggering the status effect as much as possible. So you want a lot of hits on the enemy when you've got the fire status on your weapon, so you can then trigger that effect a little bit faster. But realistically, any weapon that you prefer to use, you can use, as long as you've got also the combat styles for that weapon, as well as the more combat styles you have, the more effectiveness you'll actually be with that weapon as well. Some build tips for this build. Now, you should be crafting a lot of whetstones here. Like you can craft whetstones at some of your typical vendors, as well as fire, pipe, fuel. And if you craft extras, like if you've got more than you can actually carry, it'll actually just go into your storage. And then whenever you rest at a Veiled Edge banner, it'll auto fill back into your inventory. So really it's just good to have a lot of these stocked up, like just have, 20 or 30 or something just in your storage. Then anytime you rest at a banner, fast travel, etc., it'll just automatically refill your stock, and you won't really ever run out, even though for the most part you're going to have a low amount of these items with you at most times. You'll never really feel that you run out, because anytime you do those effects, that'll auto refresh, and you'll find them in the world sometimes too. Pretty much every enemy you run across will either be weak to fire or poison, so try one of them, and if the status effect won't build up, then switch to the other type and you'll be able to do that. In a lot of encounters, I'll typically start from stealth as well, like just to get the extra hit on enemies whenever you can. In some of like the main quest boss fights and stuff, you can't start from stealth, and realistically in those encounters, if you can get a bit of distance on them and then actually shoot your bow to apply the status effects, or just use the fire pipe, you'll definitely get that effect off and get the bonuses from it there, and you can rely on your allies to help a little bit with that as well. Mastering the blade flash mechanic. Now what that is when you have the blood gauge built up on your weapon, you'll see that little orange bar. When that's built up, if you R1, you'll like flash your weapon and restore some of your ki. Actually mastering and like comboing that in with just your normal combo attacks will significantly improve your gameplay, as essentially anytime you run out of ki, you are a sitting duck for such a long amount of time and you'll absolutely get hit. So just because we're focusing on a build here that's very aggressive, we're trying to attack a lot, build up that status effect, hit the enemy a lot, get that status effect triggered, and then obviously hit them again, to take benefits from the extra damage we're doing. Just want to make sure you're paying attention to your ki and you don't run out, because it does like hurt when you do run out, right? When you're a sitting duck. So mastering that and doing a couple of hits and then blade flashing a couple of hits, sort of learning how to combo that in between your attacks is definitely important. Also, you can take Ryoma on you with some missions as well, and it'll add fire damage to a revolver. I've actually done that a fair bit, used the revolver rather than the bow for fire damage. And then because you've got both Ryoma and me having like a revolver that has fire damage, it helps you build up that status pretty quickly, as well as just like an alternative if you want to use a different weapon. But you can only do that on missions, right? Because he can't join you just throughout the open world. But that's the build, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.